Hello everybody, I'm Renocio, and today I felt like drawing some headshots of characters from the Adventure Zone Amnesty. I've been really into re-listening to the series lately, and I've been wanting to put more focus into learning how to character design, and given that podcasts don't have set designs for their characters, it feels like a serendipitous way to kind of do both. And by do both, I mean indulge the part of me that wants to fixate on this one thing under the guise of it being intentional practice. Also, sorry if I sound a little bit weird. I think I'm starting to lose my voice. Springtime, when everybody gets sick. Anyway, I always thought it was really interesting how varied people's depictions of characters from podcasts tend to be. There's always a lot of variety based on what people imagine the character's ethnicity is, or how they project onto them. And when you're involved with a fandom, there's definitely a lot of crossover. There's a lot of being inspired by other people's designs and their headcanons and their ideas. Definitely some of my character choices have been changed based on the people that I've been hanging out with in the Amnesty fandom. I've got a great group of people on a Discord channel that I've been hanging out with a lot, and they've definitely swayed my views in different ways. Some of them also are artists themselves, and so seeing their depictions of characters over time has sort of changed mine a little bit. So I decided to start off my character design with Duck Newton, both because he's a main character in the series and because he's the only one I can draw reliably. Some people draw cute girls when they're just trying to sketch and warm up. I draw Duck. My version of Duck, and the reason I got into drawing Amnesty in the first place, is very much inspired by my friend Dips, who drew this really beautiful rendition of the "God, it's so good to see you" scene. And when I saw it, I was immediately inspired to try drawing Duck myself, and to try drawing that scene and my own rendition of it. So even though my version of the character has changed a little bit, there's a lot of features that are very similar as well. I've drawn Duck lots of different ways based on different people's interpretations of him, but this one I keep coming back to. It's got sort of a rounded jaw and a J-shaped nose and these kind of fluffy eyebrows and fluffy hair and then like a little chin strap beard. I definitely draw him as more of a stocky sort of dude. I don't picture him as particularly tall. Not a shorty, but not a huge guy either. Also, I tend to make Duck look like just the most boring, generic white guy. I like playing on the stereotype that he's supposed to be this standard, chosen one sort of figure. So of course he'd match up with everything you see in media. Which I think then is kind of fun because he goes on to subvert all of the things that you see in media. You would think for as often as I draw Minerva, I would have an easier time of her, but no, she's difficult all the time. It's not even because she has the bald head either. It's just something about trying to portray her that gets me. I don't know, I trip up all the time. But I have gotten a little better at being consistent with her face as a whole. I think the way I started drawing her nose has changed. It was also inspired by how Dips draws noses. But I definitely give her these consistently sharp cheekbones and the pointed ears. They're kind of more spade-shaped a lot of the time. And I've been trying to be consistent about the shape of her jaw, giving her sort of a square, like a long square face. But that hasn't come as consistently as I'd like it to. I've always had a little bit of trouble with face shapes and keeping them consistent and keeping characters always looking like the same character, which is kind of why I wanted to do these headshots, these studies, to see if I could make a whole cast of characters look distinct from each other. I always picture Minerva having really dark, cool tone skin, and I haven't yet figured out how to properly color that. Every time I end up coloring her skin, it always turns out more of a reddish or a warmer tone than I was going for. So that's something I gotta work on. Aubrey I've drawn a couple different ways, but she's more or less been consistent. She's been one of the characters that's also not given me too much of a hard time. I tend to give her sort of a little button nose, like an upturned nose, and kind of full lips, but not really, a lot thinner than I'd give Minerva. Aubrey, I've also drawn her as a bigger girl, and it's a really petite one, and I haven't really decided which version I prefer, but I've tried to be consistent with her eyes. She tends to have really big, bright, childish looking eyes to kind of portray that bright personality that she has throughout the show and her naivety. I also maybe just don't understand punk or something, but I haven't been a big fan of all the fishnets that she's given in clothing design and a lot of other people's depictions. So most often when I'm drawing Aubrey, she's either wearing like a black t-shirt and a vest, or I end up giving her like a big ol' snuggle sweater, and there's no in between. Also, you aren't crazy, I definitely reorganized some of the blue sketches once I had them all down. I realized after a bit that maybe I should keep the main cast together as much as I could anyway. Minerva's just gonna hang out in the top line, whatever. I like her a lot. So this is actually only the second time I've ever drawn Thacker. The first was for a collaborative music video thing, and luckily I think I nailed down more or less what I wanted him to look like in that, so here we are. Thacker as a character I've heard described as like a psychic hobo. He's a bit of a recluse, he goes wandering off into the wild by himself, he eats terrible trail mix, but he's a good-natured sort of character, so I wanted to give him this sort of unhealthy, gangly look and give him a droopy sort of beard, almost like moss coming off a tree, the long hair that he probably just throws in a ponytail and never touches again. And I tried to have his eyes be narrower and his face sort of be drooping and sagging, but still look friendly and approachable. I've also been paying more attention to the ears of characters. It's not something that we usually think of when drawing someone out, but the shape of a character's ears can be a really good identifier and can also convey a little bit more about them design-wise. So Thacker's got this droopy sort of face, but his ears are kind of goofy and stick out a little bit to imply like a good-natured personality or someone who's willing to listen. Ned is another character that I've only drawn once, and I'm not even sure that counts, because the last time I drew him, I only drew him from like the nose down. His eyes weren't even in the frame. So it was a bit of a leap just throwing Ned out here and hoping he looked more or less like I wanted him to. The character designs for Ned and the headcanons that I've heard that people have for what he looks like vary wildly. I always sort of pictured him as a very tall and sort of stocky guy, but one who wasn't particularly strong, sort of a body type that gave off the impression of mass when really it was all hot air. I wanted to convey that he had this bright, explosive personality, so he's got big eyes, kind of like Aubrey, and his beard and his hair are more of these rounded, bubbly curls. He's got these big round ears and a really open face. I didn't want to give him glasses or anything that would really hide his eyes and his nose, because I feel like he'd be the kind of character to do a lot of wild facial expressions. And where he's a character who's always telling these big grandiose stories, I wanted to make him look really approachable and really honest and really like someone you could trust and feel safe around. Also, he gets a prop because after listening through Amnesty the second time, I got really fixated on the cool blue shocky end that the Narf plaster had, so I really wanted to draw it. So Momma is described in canon as being a very big woman. I still kind of picture her smaller than Minerva. Anyway, Momma's got a very stocky sort of design. I gave her a really square jaw and a wide nose. I wanted her to look like someone who was dense, who was someone you couldn't knock down easily. I also like the idea of giving her curly hair because I just really like curly hair. And also something about the little curly flyaways really implies someone who's been stressed out and tired, which is also why she has sort of the deep bags under her eyes and a more narrowed eye shape. Berkeley, I think, is one of my more divergent designs from what people tend to draw. For whatever reason, when I was listening to the series, I didn't recall that Berkeley was supposed to be like a big hairy dude with a big beard. So in my brain, he was always like still very tall and broad-shouldered. I pictured him as more of a Native American dude, so I wanted to give him that really striking profile with the high bridge nose. I ended up giving him pointed ears as well, I guess just as a nod to his sylph side, but also because humans have pointed ears sometimes too. I have pointed ears, so I thought it'd be kind of fun to throw that in there. I also felt like his narrowed eyes and heavy brows and the bags under his eyes, plus the long, heavy flowing hair all kind of led to the idea that he was very tired, and when contrasted with the hard lines of his facial structure, would imply someone that was putting up with your shit but not enjoying it. And Jake! Jake was sort of fun. I like drawing him a lot. He's got big, wide open eyes, huge expressions, and I like making his hair super fluffy and kind of like a mullet, but not a terrible mullet. He's an interesting character in that I think he was just put in the series as a bit of a joke. I think he's implied to be like in his 20s, but he's really stuck on all this 80s slang. He's very much like a surfer dude on a snowboard. Anyway, I just find him really fun to draw. I like his big round shape. I like his big expressions. I think he's very entertaining. I feel like in canon, Griffin specifically said that Jake was a harp seal. I might be imagining that, but I've always pictured him as more of an Arctic seal. So when I draw him, I tend to give him a lot of really pale colors. So grayish eyes and like hair so blonde it's almost white and really pale skin. It makes for a fun contrast with all the big, bright, colorful clothing I tend to give him as well. With Danny, I wanted to kind of do the opposite. She's implied to be someone who's very withdrawn, who's kind of quiet, who has this deadpan, sarcastic humor. I wanted to make her look willowy. I gave her sort of a long face and a long nose and those sylphy pointed ears, but then wanted to imply a little more playfulness with the long curly hair. So it's still a little bit of that peaceful, slouchy look, but with a little bit of pep to it as well. And then Stern. Stern gave me so much trouble. I mean, I've never drawn the guy before either, and I didn't have a super clear mental image of what I wanted him to look like. I've seen a couple different depictions where he's an Asian man, and I really liked that. I wanted to try to work on that, but as is probably obvious, I'm still learning how to depict people of different ethnicities, because for the longest time I was just drawing in like an anime style where everyone just had shovel faces and everybody had more or less the same skin tone and same body shape, and it was very boring, and I don't know why it took me so long to realize that I was doing this very heterogeneous style of drawing. I've only really started diversifying in the last 5 years? It's a long time coming. But anyway, all this is to say that I was trying for a certain look with Stern. Don't think I quite nailed it, but I am pleased with his sort of narrow face and the droopy, dorky sort of look he ended up with. So Hollis is a character that I've been nervous to share my headcanons about, because I've been picturing them as a two-spirit indigenous person, and not being indigenous myself, I didn't want to come in and start stepping on people's toes. Mostly I had that association because when I was thinking of Hollis being a non-binary character and someone who was in charge of and very protective of this sort of found family group of people, the Hornets, I, for whatever reason, thought of Dr. James McCocus, who's a two-spirit medical professional that was on The Amazing Race with their partner, and so I immediately had this strong mental image of the two of them as very similar. Beyond that, I'd pictured Hollis as very short, and as someone who, like Berkeley and Momma, is just very tired of everyone else's shit. So they also got a very sort of deadpan expression. I tend to draw them a little more exasperated looking. In any case, I thought it was a little bit more fun to diverge from the standard depictions that I've seen of Hollis, where there's someone with like an undercut or dyed hair or a whole bunch of piercings. There was an association with them being the leader of a bike gang or a sports gang, I guess they are, and being more like punk and rough around the edges. But I thought it'd be interesting if they were just more of like a chill person. I don't have a whole lot to say about my Keith design. It was very strongly influenced by Berry Muffin on Tumblr's version, but I made him a little bit rounder, a little bit softer on the edges. I wanted him to look like somebody who was a really good hype man who got riled up easily, but who at base wasn't exactly a confrontational person, wasn't really looking for a fight. So he's got more of a meek sort of set of expressions, and I picture him as being kind of tall, but not the burliest sort of person. And then I had to go back and clean up Hollis's jacket because I realized the color that I'd picked for Keith's was better. I don't entirely know if I'm cool with Pigeon's design. I'm not 100% sure how old she's supposed to be, but I was kind of leaning more into the like late 20s for age, and I pictured her as a very woodsy, crunchy sort of person, but a different brand of crunchy than Danny. I pictured Pigeon as a lot like sturdier, someone who would go around in the woods all day, but apparently she works in public services as like a desk clerk too, so I didn't want to make her look too outdoorsy either. I figured I'd get a nice mix with this hipstery sort of look where she's got a toque on and she's got kind of braids that are more utilitarian than anything. And then a snuggly sweater, because who doesn't want a snuggly sweater? I want a snuggly sweater. And then Leo! In recent days, weeks, Leo's become one of my favorite characters. I just find him so fascinating, and I feel like he's a character with a really interesting backstory and really interesting ways of interacting with other people. I've only drawn him a couple times, but I actually took the time to like do a character study before now. So I've got a pretty solid design for Leo down. With a last name like Tarkisian, he's probably Armenian, so I wanted to give him sort of a long, strong nose profile and also some pretty high cheekbones. I gave him a receding hairline as well because he's an older guy, and then a little goatee because it was a nice mix from the beards on the rest of the male characters, and it was kind of cute. From the math I've done, I figure Leo's probably like 65, 70, so I probably drew him looking a little bit too young, or colored him a little bit too young. We're just gonna say his chosen powers gave him not entirely gray hair. But on top of the age, I wanted to make him look like someone who'd gone through a lot of shit, but was also still like a very bright-eyed, kind, happy person. And he also gets a snuggle sweater because I want this boy to be happy and comfortable. And last but not least, we have Sarah Drake. I probably should have done all the chosen in one chunk alongside Minerva, but Minerva got to be at the top of the heap and these two poor kids got stuck to the end. Whenever I draw Sarah, I always picture her as kind of similar to Duck. So very short, very round, got that sort of rounded jaw, only hers is a little more on the square side, and she's got bigger, brighter eyes than Duck does. I wanted to have her look very curious, very interested in things, and I really like drawing her hair. There's something really cute about the short cut and the sort of flowy nature of it. Also, I'm just a sucker for fluffy bangs. And I gave her some big, stereotypically nerdy glasses, because she's sort of implied to be, I mean, she's an astrophysicist, but chances are she's also a huge dork about space, which is frankly relatable. And on that note, one of the ideas that came out of the Discord server that I'm on is that Sarah has little space-themed tattoos, so I gave her a little planet and the constellation on her arm, just because. And there we go, 15 headshots of Amnesty characters. I think I got most of the main cast, all of the main cast, but I definitely forgot some characters. I realized after the fact that I didn't get a chance to draw Juno Divine, and I love Juno, so if you guys like this, please let me know. I'd love to do a second set of like 15 more characters. Are there even 15 more that I could draw? Whatever, I would happily do it. So leave a comment, leave a like, let me know if it's your dig, and feel free to subscribe if you liked hanging out here, because I'll be doing more of this kind of stuff in the future. Later!